Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is for our end of book project. So, as you know, we're doing remote learning, unfortunately, because of the corona pandemic that's gripping the planet. And it's kind of affected the way we would do our end of book project things. We had some fun assessment stuff signed up for you guys, but unfortunately, we got to switch it up a little bit. So, my partner, Mrs. Pottenberg, shout out, what's up, Miss P? She gonna laugh at that, Mrs. Pottenberg. We are. She came up with several ideas for us to try to do, and we decided to give you guys some options. So I'll go through the end of book project things that we can do that you can do more remotely. So just follow along with me as I read the notes that we have here. So if you see Copper Sun end of book project, since we are doing this remotely, the projects chosen look different than what we would be doing in class. Pretty obvious there. We, Mr. Matthews, Ms. Pottenberg, want to give you some options as well as challenge you because there's so much to be learned from this book. Your options will vary depending on your class period, so please pay attention. So as you guys can see, we have options for periods 1, 5, 6, and 8. Those are general ed classes. So for option 1, imagine it is 1 year after the end of the story. So all of you should have finished the story by now. If you haven't, finish this weekend or next day or so. Imagine it is 1 year after the end of this story. In Google Docs, write one page, 12-point font, Times New Roman, double spaced, about what the character of your choosing is doing now. What is their life like? Who do they live with? Are they happy? What new challenges might they now have? You may choose one of the following characters. And I'll scroll up. You can choose Polly. You can choose Amari. You can choose Tidbit. You can choose Teeny. Or you can choose Isabel Derby. Now, just to go in a little more depth with that, you guys have to write this one-page document. And we've said it all year, but just to kind of remind you guys, since we have been out of school for a while, when we ask you to do a 12-point font, Times New Roman font, and type it double spaced, that is the standard font size, font look, and the way they want it spaced in high school. So I know in middle school, a lot of times we've been seeing through the years, we were hopefully trying to break you of it, but everyone wants to write in bigger font. They want to write 14. They want to write 16 because, it's easier to see. They want to write in the more fancier fonts, monotype Corsiva or something like that. When you get to high school, and those of you who will be going to college, you'll need to write your papers in a 12-point font and in Times New Roman. Sometimes in college, they'll let you do Courier New because it looks like a typewriter. But for the most part, it's Times New Roman and it's double spaced. You have to get used to doing that. In high school, they'll even have you write your margins a certain way or have your tabs a certain way, depending on how particular your language arts teacher is going to be. So we really want you to get used to writing in that format. Now, if you want to write in 14, 16 font while you're typing the project, that's fine. Just remember when it's time to edit or before you turn it in, you select it all and you make it into the 12-point font, the Times New Roman, and make sure it's double spaced. Okay. Hopefully your parents can help you with that. It's pretty easy to do that. You can see up here, you can just go to paragraph. When you hit paragraph, right, it shows you line spacing. This is multiple, but you can make it double, make that 0.00, and then you're good, as far as that goes. All right, so these are the characters who basically we know what happened with Polly and Maria Tidbit. They are at Fort Mose. What is happening to them 1 year after the end of their story? What's going on? Some of you may want to research a little bit about Fort Mose to find out what his ultimate fate was. But definitely choose one of those characters that's at Fort Mose, and you guys have a pretty good idea what their life is like. Did Polly meet up with Nathan? You know what I'm saying? Did they not? Did she meet someone else? Did Mari meet somebody? How's Mari doing now with the baby? Did she keep the baby? Like, it's all these different possibilities you could have. how's Tidbit dealing with his mom not being around. The same with Teeny and Isabel. Now that Derby's dead, Mr. Derby, what happened to Teeny? How did she cope? With Isabel there running it. Did Clay come back? Like, we don't know. You guys have so many different possibilities you could use. Make sure you utilize that, think about it, take your time, make a pretty good story. Option 2, create a podcast. Use your phone or computer or to record yourself and create a 5-minute video as if you were a reporter at one of the following scenes. So you will just basically pretend like you are there and you're like a journalist, and you're telling us what happened. You're telling your boss what happened. You're telling your audience what happened. So what was going on at the destruction of Ziavi? A day on the slave ship, a day on the plantation, a day in the life of a slave, just a regular day, a day in the life of a slave owner. What did they do? The day Teeny found out Tidbit was alive. So think about the types of things you will be seeing in these scenarios. Please be as descriptive as possible so the listener can imagine what you are seeing. You may also interview someone who would be in the scene. So for an example, you can interview Amari at the destruction of Ziavi. Like, say, you snuck in, you were able to talk to her, you understood her language, and you wanted to see what she was feeling before she got shipped to Cape Coast. You could do this with a family member who is willing to play along, or with a classmate via Zoom, FaceTime, or Google Hangouts. So you can pretend like one of them are, one of your family members is one of these people, tell them what's going on in the story, and they can give you some information back. So, however is easiest for you, whichever one you feel would be more exciting, a Zoom with your friends or FaceTime or Google Hangouts, as long as you can get it recorded and sent to us, that'll work fine with us. Option 3. Write a letter to one of the characters explaining your feelings about the events in the story and giving them advice. Your letter should be completed in Google Docs, 1 page, again, 12-point font, Times New Roman and doublespace. Your character options are you can write a letter to Amari, you can write a letter to Polly, you can write a letter to Mrs. Derby, Teeny, Bessa, or Clay. Just give them advice, tell them how you're feeling. So pretty standard thing. Again, 1 page. Let me see. And option 4 be a 1-pager. I'm actually going to make a separate video to go over the 1-pager. So don't worry about that right now. That's option 4. That's something it should be pretty fun. That's one of the assessments we would have done actually. So I would make a separate video because that's going to take up more time to actually explain. Okay. If you have any questions, please email me or Mrs. Pottenberg to find out precisely how we want it. So we, every day we're checking emails. If you got a problem, please email us, inbox us, whatever. Remember for these things here, just please be descriptive. Talk about what was going on at the destruction on the slave ship. And it has to be 5 minutes. 5 minutes to go by like that. Like, I've been talking for 8 minutes just reading 3 options, right? So if most of you should know the story pretty well. Go back, look over it again about everything that was going on, and you should be able to be pretty descriptive on that. All right. Now, these are options for periods 3 and 4. So my 3rd period and my 4th period. You guys have different options. So if you are not in these periods, you don't have to worry about these. Option 1 is a comparison paper. I love this idea. Ms. Pottenberg came up with this. I love this idea. Consider these 2 thoughts from Amari and Polly. So this is Amari's thoughts. I think we have arrived in a backwards world where black skins are few and not respected, and pale skins seem to rule. Then we have this view from Polly's thoughts, what Polly was thinking. Polly looked at the slave cell. The women were wailing and acting as if something terrible was happening to them. Polly snorted and turned away. Living here in the colonies had to be better than living like a savage in the jungle. They ought to be grateful, she thought. She thought of the Negroes she known as a child, well-fed and happy slaves, with no worries about finding employment. No, she had no sympathy. Okay, remember this is Polly early on in the story. Now, you will write in Google Docs 2 pages, Times New Roman, 12-point font, doublespace, that compares the subject of slavery from the slave's point of view to slavery from the point of view of the dominant culture. So basically what you're doing You are going to compare how the slaves felt about slavery, what was slavery to them, right? And you're going to compare that or contrast that to how white people in America felt about slavery. They were the dominant culture at the time. How did they feel about slavery? And if you go through the book, Polly's a pretty good example of this. She showcases it pretty well because she's not a slave owner, but she has the prevailing or the standard thought of how most people in America viewed slavery or viewed slaves. Okay, especially people who weren't rich, because most of the people who were rich were either merchants who were really rich or slave owners. Maybe a couple other people here or there who might have inherited money, but for the most part, those were your rich people. So Polly was not rich, so she had a different. She was poor, but she had a different upbringing than the rich people. So and most people were like that at that time. So her ideas of slavery at the time is pretty standard for everyone else. Okay, so try to compare that. How is it different? How does it show how the slaves actually felt? Because remember, a lot of white people didn't think that they had feelings that were as sophisticated as theirs. How did they really feel though? Okay, because these are human beings. So definitely compare that, compare and contrast, and remember that it's 2 pages. All right, 2 pages, which should be fairly easy. The simplest way to do it, I would think, would be to either have 1 page from the slave's point of view and 1 page from the slave master or the dominant culture's point of view, or you can come up with like 3 things, and then like, well, they thought this about the slaves, they thought this about their pain, they thought this about their freedom, and like alternate. But just make sure you have 2 pages. Okay. Option 2, same thing from the other one. You guys are going to create a podcast, and instead of 5 minutes, you'll create a 7-minute recording as if you are a reporter at one of the following scenes. And it's the exact same scenes that the other classes did. Destruction of Ziavi, day on the slave ship, day on the plantation, day in the life of a slave, a day in the life of a slave owner, and the day Teeny found out Tidbit was alive. Again, be as descriptive as you can. You may also interview someone who would be in the scene. So you guys would just basically be acting. You could do that as well. And then option 3, we read the poem, The Negro's Complaint. We read the poem, The Negro's Complaint by William Cowper. Write a poem from the point of view of Amari or Bessa from their experience as told in the novel. The poem should be a minimum of 3 stanzas, 6 lines per stanza, and have a rhyme scheme of A, B, C, D, A, B, or A, B, C, D, C, D. That's just how the rhyme scheme is going to go. If you're not 100% clear on rhyme schemes, you can definitely Google what the rhyme schemes are like, or go to YouTube and find some videos that kind of show you if you're confused on that, if you choose to go the poem route. But in this case, you'll write a poem from the point of view of Amari or Bessa, and say what's going on in your poem. Sometimes poetry can express things in more detail than just writing something can. So if you have a poet's heart, definitely look at option 3. And option 4, again, for you, is also the 1-pager, and I'll make a separate video about that to kind of go over that option in greater detail. So option 4 is the 1-pager. So these are things we've given you guys. Please take a day or so to kind of think about which one you want to do, which one to be best for you, which one to be the most fun, the most exciting, and just something you know that you could do well. So please, if you have any questions, email myself, email Mrs. Pottenberg, inbox us. Please let us know if you have any questions. We want you to be as successful as possible. And we look forward to seeing some of the work that you guys turn in. This is actually the fun part of the story. We really look forward to seeing what you guys come up with and seeing what you learn from this story, because there's a lot of stuff to learn from it. So, all right. Thanks for your time. I'll see you in the next video as I go over the 1-pagers. Yeah, you guys have a good week. Take care. Peace.